You know, life has this strange way of showing you that you're not really living. You go through days, weeks, years, and you think everything is fine. You think you're moving forward. But then something happens. Something small, sometimes almost invisible. And suddenly, you realize that your life isn't yours anymore. That you're just existing. For me, that day, that day was like standing in the middle of a storm, except it wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, it was quiet. Quiet, and in that quiet, I could finally hear myself. I remember waking up that morning and nothing seemed different. The sun was just coming through my blinds, painting thin lines across the floor, but as I sat there, staring at the ceiling, I felt exhausted. Not tired like after a long day at work, but the kind of exhaustion that sits in your chest, that fills your lungs with weight. I realized I had been living someone else's expectations, doing what people thought I should do, rather than what I wanted to. It's a strange feeling when you suddenly notice that your life isn't your own. All the little compromises, all the just one more day and maybe tomorrow had added up. I looked around my apartment, small, familiar, safe, and it felt suffocating. Safe, but suffocating. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. I didn't know what start over really meant at first. I didn't know if it meant quitting my job, moving to a new city, leaving behind people I loved, or maybe all of it. I just knew I had to break something, break the pattern of living someone else's story. I took a shower, and as the water poured over me, it felt like washing off more than dirt. It was symbolic, I guess. I let the hot water hit my back and shoulders, and I tried to imagine leaving everything behind, leaving the apartment, leaving the routine, leaving the silent, invisible cage I had built for myself over years. I remember looking at my reflection in the mirror afterward, and I didn't see the same man that I had been for so long. I saw someone fragile, someone scared, someone who had made too many compromises. But I also saw someone who could maybe change. That morning, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have courage, at least in the conventional sense. What I had was clarity. The kind of clarity that cuts through fear, doubt, everything you've been holding on to. And it whispered, softly, "It's time." I started small, really small. I picked up the phone and called a friend I hadn't spoken to in years, someone I had avoided because my life had been too busy, too complicated, too full of excuses. I said, "Hey, I need to talk. Can we meet?" And they said, "Yes." That small yes was the first spark. Then I started writing. Not for anyone. Not for a journal. Not for social media. I wrote for me. Everything I hadn't said. Everything I had buried. I wrote about fear, about mistakes, about regret, about longing. I wrote about the life I wanted, not the life I was living. And the more I wrote, the more I realized I had been carrying myself as a shadow of someone else. And shadows don't live. Shadows just exist. And I wanted to live. I remember walking outside that day. It was a Wednesday, normal, gray, quiet, but to me, it felt like the first day of something. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what the next steps would be. I just walked. And for the first time in a long time, I noticed the air, the wind hitting my face, the smell of the city, the distant sounds of people, moving, living. And I realized I wanted that too. I wanted to move. I wanted to feel. I wanted to make choices that were mine, not borrowed from someone else's life. So I made a small decision, a decision that seemed insignificant, but it was huge. I decided that I would not go back to my old routines. I would not go back to being the man I was before. That day, I quit pretending. That day, I chose honesty, not just with the world, but with myself. It wasn't easy. Change never is. And I had no idea what starting over truly meant. I had debts, responsibilities, people who depended on me, but I realized none of that mattered if I was living a life that didn't belong to me. So I started taking small steps. I cleaned my apartment differently, organized my things, threw away what I didn't need, not just physical stuff, but emotional baggage too. I let go of grudges, stopped trying to prove myself, stopped asking for permission. I started saying no, and it was terrifying. Saying no to the easy path, the comfortable life. But in saying no, I found freedom. I found clarity. I found myself. I remember that evening. I sat alone on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not a loud, dramatic hope. Quiet, soft, but real. And I realized starting over isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing yourself right now. Even despite the past, it's about showing up for the person you are, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's scary. And that night, I promised myself. I promised that I would live intentionally, that I would not let fear dictate my choices, that I would honor my own story, even if it meant walking alone for a while. The days that followed weren't easy. There were doubts. There were setbacks. There were moments when I questioned if I had made a mistake. But each morning, I reminded myself that day, the day I decided to start over, that was the day I chose life. And life is messy, imperfect, complicated, but it's real. And I finally belong to it. I've learned something important since that day. Starting over doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean erasing your mistakes or pretending they never happened. It means accepting them, learning from them, using them as fuel, not chains. And that realization, it changes everything. So, if you're listening to this and you feel stuck, trapped, exhausted by your own life, know this. You don't have to wait for a dramatic moment to start over. You can start today, quietly, slowly, but intentionally. One decision at a time. One honest step at a time. That's what I did, and it changed my life. Not overnight, not magically, but it started, and that's all it takes. One day, one decision, and the courage to choose yourself. Thank you for listening.